Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I know we're in many time zones probably, so thanks a lot for joining. So today we will be talking about continuous discovery, in particular in my case about research ops as the engine for product discovery, or how can it become the backbone for your continuous discovery practice. So quick intro about me. If you want, you can scan the QR code and you can have all my information, contact details, and everything. As already said, I'm the UX research lead at kiwi.com, and I also have an agency called the 180. And I've been helping teams in different parts of the world, especially in Europe and in South America, to build the research infrastructure from scratch. And in particular, coaching teams who are experimenting with continuous discovery from the research ops perspective. So to start, I want to take you in a little bit of a journey to the past. I want to take you back in time. And since this is quite a producty topic, I want to start with this quote. Maybe some of you know it, some of you remember it. It's "Get out of the building." This is a quote coined by Steve Blank, the author of the 4 Steps to Epiphany and the Startup Owner's Manual. This is a quote that's, I think, around 20 years old. And with this, what Steve was trying to explain is that back at the time, companies were used to build products behind closed doors, with no customers around, in complete isolation. And Steve believed that this had a lot of problems, especially when those products actually hit the market. So he was encouraging teams, especially startups, to get out of the building and talk to people, talk to customers, show them things, show them stuff, discuss ideas, and so on. So basically, he was advocating for user input. This was later called customer development, and many things came afterwards. So fast forward in time, many things came into play. We have the boom of design thinking, the rise of UX, the growth of UX. We have many voices advocating for the user. We have user centricity. We have all these topics that actually bring us to where we are today. And I'd say that nowadays, I feel confident enough to say that now organizations are investing time and resources in talking to customers. In many cases, this is translated into having a dedicated researcher or a research specialist, or actually having complete teams of researchers. I know in the last couple of months, or especially this year, we kind of took a step back in this regard because of all the layoffs and so on. I know it's a tough situation. And I want to acknowledge that, but I'm confident to say that we are in a better position nowadays regarding this than when Steve Blank wrote that quote 20 years ago. So with this, we have, as I said, the emergence of UX research as a discipline, or the UX researcher as a role. But then other things came up, especially in the last couple of years. So I'm going to mention 2 particular phenomena. These are the rise of research democratization, which means that people who are not research specialists are conducting research. I'm not going to go or open this topic up and say, okay, what do I think about research democratization? Is it good? Is it bad? I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to acknowledge it and say, okay, this is happening. And more companies nowadays are going this way. So this is getting trendy. And then we also have another phenomena, which is the rise of continuous discovery, which is powered by Teresa Torres's framework or book, which is great. I love it, by the way. But this type of work entails that the product trios are basically product managers, product designers, and engineers. Of course, there are researchers around, and Teresa explains how to incorporate research into this, but the protagonists of this story are the trios. This means this can happen also in companies that have no researcher. So these 2 things, or these 2 phenomena, actually cause or take us to the situation where researchers are not the only ones talking to customers nowadays. Is this good? Is this bad? Well, it depends. Sorry for a very researchy answer, which is it depends. Researchers, we love to say that thing, but I think it goes case by case. And as I said before, I've been working with teams who are experimenting with continuous discovery. And from what I saw so far, especially in the teams that don't have a researcher around, because when you have a researcher in the team or in the company, it's a little bit different, and there's kind of like a balance there, and it gets a little bit on track, but that's normally not the case. Usually teams who are experimenting with this are, as Torres said, like the trios. And I have to say it gets tricky. Normally when I work with clients, I get onboarded and I try to assess how they're working so far, what they did so far, how they've been approaching the whole continuous discovery thing. And normally what I see kind of looks like this. It's a little bit of a train wreck, I have to say. It gets a little bit chaotic, it gets a little bit, especially, considering that these are people who are not specialists in research. I'm not saying it always goes this case, but so far this is what I observed. And I identified common patterns and common problems these teams have faced. So the first thing I saw was sloppy recruitment, meaning the teams usually, and this is a big black hole in teams who are trying out continuous discovery. Many teams just reach out to customers a little bit randomly, maybe in uneven batches, so maybe 2 weeks they have a lot of people to talk to, in the upcoming 2 they have nobody, then like random customers with different profiles, like not tracking who are you reaching out to. So really this is really bad. Probably I would say this is one of the most recurrent problems I saw. Then a lot of the output got lost, or usually gets lost. I saw teams who are interviewing customers or talking to customers, and a lot of things they wrote down, then they were like scattered notes, and then when they went into a discussion, then they discussed something and they just pick a couple of things, and then the rest they discarded or got lost. So a lot of the meaty stuff, maybe something that could be useful in the future, got completely lost in the way. Then the wrong tools. That's also something that's quite common. They're using insufficient tools for what they want to achieve. For example, for moderating testing or unmoderated testing, or they're using, for example, tools like the opportunity solution tree the wrong way. They use it, maybe they build it on Google Sheets, or they use it on a quarterly basis or a semester basis instead of continuously. So they're just misusing the stuff. And this is the point where normally all the researchers in the audience kind of cringe a little bit, and it's bias. With bias, I mean introducing bias, especially in the interviewing part. And you all researchers out there, you probably heard this many times, especially when you're conducting with interviews with people who are not researchers. This is kind of questions like, so would you buy this for 10 euros? Or so which one do you prefer? Or is this what you like? These kind of things. So quite often, so a lot of bias there. Then I also saw no triangulation. And with no triangulation, I mean, they were not giving dimension to the opportunities. They were not using different types of data, so they just got something and they just went with it. In most cases, they had the alarming approach. That means one customer said something, so okay, we should go now and build this or fix this or change this. So they didn't give enough polishing to this opportunity, so no triangulation happening there. And I also saw a lot of cherry picking. And with cherry picking, I mean cherry picking in different ways. So on one hand, we have the cherry picking of user input or whatever they got from the interviews. For example, many teams, when they went to the interviews and customers said something they liked or they kind of were in line with what they were expecting, they said, okay, this is great, let's just write it down. And when they were a little bit like indifferent or they were not really aligned with what they were expecting, they said, like, yeah, okay, maybe this is not the right customer, or maybe they didn't get it. So cherry picking what they got from the interviews, and cherry picking in general in terms of the process. So the framework of the process is meant to work in one way, and they were like, because the idea is that it should work with all that there is built. Of course, there's some space for adaptation, of course, but you're supposed to work one way, so this is effective. But in many cases, they were just picking random parts of the book or the process, and they were randomly adapting it. So a lot of cherry picking there too. So to sum up, I think that the situation led up ended up in many ways. So on one hand, we had the people who like kind of cherry picked or kind of like disrupted the process a little bit, or changed the guidelines a little bit, and then of course it failed, and they ended up with the feeling that, okay, this is not useful. So in some cases it was research is not useful. In other cases it was, okay, continuous discovery is not useful. But it's sad because this is an amazing framework and this is super useful and can be super powerful if you use it the right way. And in other cases, which is even worse, sometimes you think you're making progress, but if you don't see these mistakes that are like little, maybe they're so subtle that you don't notice them at the right time, it can happen that you build the wrong product. If you have bias here and there, if you have this bad recruitment, in many ways you can make mistakes, and these mistakes can kind of snowball, and in the end you build something that's wrong, and that's not a good situation to be in. So the problem is not the teams. The problems are not the process itself. The thing is, teams are doing discovery without a backbone, without a proper structure behind. In order to make the most out of a continuous discovery practice, you need to have the proper backbone in place. So this is where ResearchOps can chip in and can bring the most value. So many of you probably are familiar with ResearchOps, many of you maybe aren't. So to give a quick definition, ResearchOps is the people, mechanisms, and strategies that set user research in motion. This is a beautiful definition by the ResearchOps community. You can probably find others online. But if you want to put it very, very simply, maybe, of course, it doesn't paint the full picture, but it's pretty straightforward. I'd say that ResearchOps is infrastructure for research. So there are many ways in which ResearchOps can create value. And normally I get this question speaking about ResearchOps is, yeah, okay, we don't have researchers in the team, so we don't need to worry about this now. Or we also hear stuff like, yeah, okay, we'll think about that later. Maybe let's try if this works. And well, let me tell you something. You should be working on ResearchOps from the start. If you start your continuous discovery practice, you can make the most out of it. You can see the impact and the productivity and the output of the continuous discovery multiply because you're building it on a strong foundation. You're building it on the right infrastructure. So I want to tell you 5 things ResearchOps can help you with. So after this talk, maybe tomorrow you can gather your team. If you're doing continuous discovery, you can say, okay, we need to polish these things. Or we need to think of ResearchOps in a different way. So the first thing ResearchOps can help you out with is participant management. This, I'd say, is a black hole in many teams. There are many things that can go wrong, and this is where ResearchOps can create value right away. So continuous discovery works on the premise that we should be talking to customers each week, be having weekly touch points with customers. And in order to make this happen, we need to have, I don't want to say automated process in place, but at least a established or well-oiled process in place. So you need to know how to reach out to them, you need to have emails ready, you need to know how often are you reaching out to them, who did you contact, who answered, who didn't, response rate. So you need to track this properly on one hand. Then you also want to incentivize people to join your interviews, and you want to, people are not giving out their time for free, so you need to give something back. In some cases it's Amazon gift cards or credits on your product or money. You have to figure that out, but you need to track who did you give what, especially for finance and everything. So you need to be tidy with that. Then, it's I don't know the exact rules in our country, so I cannot speak for. I probably have people from different countries, so I don't know the details. But I'm going to talk about Europe, and I know that in some states in the United States it also works like this. You cannot simply blast emails like it's like 2004. You need to be compliant with the regulations. You need to be compliant actually with the law. We have the GDPR law, and we have the data policies, privacy matters, and so on. And you need to be compliant. So you need to give people if you send emails to them, they have to opt into those emails. You have to give them the possibility to unsubscribe. You need to tell them where you will be storing the data. You need to be pretty careful with that because it can get you into trouble because you will be breaking the law. So you need to be careful and tidy in that regard. Plus, you have NDAs. If you're showing stuff that's maybe something that you're working on in your company, you need to be careful with that too. Plus, I have to say that it's not the same if you're working B2B or B2C. You need to find the right solution for your team and for your company. Also, this also piles up to incentives. It's not the same to incentivize or to give something to regular customers and to companies or so. So this is a place where researchers can create a lot of value right away. You can set your practice like straight into like on track. Then another important point is training the team in research. I know many research ops professionals don't necessarily come from research, but most of us do. And this is where we can actually help the team step up. And this is where we can address the bias thing that I mentioned before. By training the team on what are the methods they can use, when to use which of the methods. When quantitative data, quantitative methods, qualitative, the different types, how to use those types, how to conduct interviews the proper way, or usability testing or surveys. Training them in how to use this can really make a difference. And this can also be translated into templating, for example. You can create template or guide for your team so they can start, especially those who aren't as experienced in research as others. It can help them, okay, this is how you ask a question. You can create a question bank for your team and they can pick some of them from there till they get used to it, until they get to the next level. This way you can ensure the quality of the research output. Otherwise, one of the things we face normally is that when people who do research, who are not researchers themselves, who are not specialists, they may create subpar output because it's normal. They are not specialists in that. It's like maybe researchers don't know how to design, and it's fine. You need to help them in this regard. So this is where you can add some value. Then we have the repository thing. Well, with repository, I don't mean this full-blown whole library thing like built in a really cool with taxonomy and everything in tools like Airtable or Dovetail or Condense. These tools are amazing, of course, if you can, and if you have the possibility, use them and build a repository there. But for the practice here, I mean, at least you need to have a place where the output of your research can live, and you can revisit later on, and you can search, and you can look, because sometimes it happens that, as I said, if you conduct interviews and you don't store this output somewhere, it can get lost, and you're losing. Well, that of course costs money, time, effort. So maybe there's something that you found out that maybe it's not useful now, but it can be useful in the future. Maybe you can triangulate it with something else later on, or you can spark new ideas later on. So you need to build a place where all this can live. So building a repository doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be super complicated or complex, just MVP, whatever you feel fit, just try to track that and put it there so the whole team can benefit. And this is owned by research ops or by the person in charge of the research ops. This can take a load out of the team. Then fourth is tooling. As I quickly hinted before, we have tooling in two ways. You have the proper software tools, meaning you can maybe empower the team or overhaul the team with different tools. Let's say you want to do moderated testing for some of the solutions. Hey, okay, here you go, Maze. If you want to conduct, if you want to recruit user interviews, here you go. If you want to, I don't know, maybe have transcriptions of the interviews doing, and you have AI to create clusters for you. Okay, you have a loop panel, for example. So having the ownership of all these tools or suggesting tools for the team can really help them make the most out of it. And then we have triangulation, which is a very powerful thing. Many teams overlook this part, and this is key because this gives dimension and gives volume to the insights you collect. So triangulation, and Teresa Torres mentioned this in her book. She says that insights should be triangulated, meaning you should be combining different types of data. You should be combining qualitative with quantitative, and maybe you can connect it with other things. So with helping with triangulation, I mean research ops can be the connector or the enabler of research throughout the organization and can help you mix different sources and different types of information or data. For example, it can connect your team with, let's say, customer support. It can connect your team with, let's say, sales. It can connect your team with other departments. You can this whole back to back or like end to end connection can be led by research hubs. So this is a very powerful point that many teams overlook, and is key for the quality of your insights and for actually assessing the opportunities properly. So I went over what can research hubs help you with. The following question that comes along is why? Why should we invest, or why should you invest time, effort, and money in research hubs? And the answer is pretty simple. If you are doing continuous discovery, and if you want to make the most out of this practice, you need to have the proper infrastructure in place. Otherwise, your effort can fall short, can fall apart, or can definitely fail. As I said before, there are many causes there are many ways this can fail, and research hubs ensures its base, so it doesn't fail, or at least it doesn't fail the way you thought it would. Then the third one, it will be how. So how should we start with this? Because in many cases, okay, what should I do? I don't have a research hub specialist in the company or the team. So here you have many ways to go about this. So it's a little bit like choose your own adventure. So you can either hire a research hub specialist, which there are plenty in the market if you look for them, or you can then appoint someone in your team to do this. It could be maybe if you have a researcher in your team, it could be this person kind of leading these things. Or it could be maybe you can split the load between different team members or different roles. You do as you please. And in many cases, if none of them are kind of like fully knowledgeable in research hubs things, you can hire a coach and you can have your team train in research hub. That's basically what I've been doing. This is not self-advertisement. I mean, there are plenty of us out there, but we can really help you out. And the last question that comes is when? When should I start looking at these topics? When should I start thinking of research hubs? And I normally, when I answer the same thing, I usually answer back that if you are doing continuous discovery, the best time to start with your research hubs or building your research infrastructure was yesterday. And the second best time is today. So normally when they ask me, when should you start? I'm asking, okay, what are you waiting for to start? Okay, thanks everybody. So now let's go for Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Julian. I really enjoyed that. I'm a massive fan of research ops, so it was great seeing kind of another perspective on get started even before you have research.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So as Julian said, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in on whichever platform you're watching this on, and I'll collate them and I'll kind of put them to Julian. But while you're thinking of your questions, I'm going to kick off with one question that came to my mind. So you kind of touched on it at the end, saying how, and maybe you hire somebody external or you ask somebody internally to do this. What jumped out at me is it seems like every company is maybe reinventing the wheel here a little bit, because every company is kind of going, how are we going to deal with GDPR? How are we going to deal with kind of tracking our participants? The training courses are likely very similar between companies of how are we going to train people on doing research. Is there a more of a product offering, or is there some kind of templates out there that people can just download best practices or anything rather than trying to build it from scratch themselves?
Well, in the case of everything GDPR related or law related, I'm very wary of recommending any templates or resources. I mean, it's not that I'm just like kicking the ball outside, but what I'm saying is, like, normally if you have to deal with regulations and law, you better check with your legal team. That's even if you find templates online, even if you have resources, just check with your legal team, because they are the expert in that and they're the ones responsible for that side. So GDPR things aside, that always check with your legal team. I mean, don't get, of course, even if you know some stuff, you can then discuss and you can maybe go into details of how you put this into practice. But normally I recommend this, tackle it together with the legal team. So that's on one hand. And then in terms of research hubs in general, I think there are a lot of resources out there. You have the Research Ops community, which is a Slack community, and also they have a lot of articles, a lot of things. Many people are creating a lot of things online. So you have to look up a little bit. There's no centralized place where you can say, okay, I want to learn everything about Research Ops. Still, it's not happening. Hopefully in the future. But so far, there are some. I would start there. Check the community, talk to people who are specialists in Research Ops, and we can point you out to other people who are doing this. But still, this is a pretty. It's not a completely new field, but it's something that is shaping up lately. It's been shaping up in the last couple of years. That's what I would say. So we're still finding a centralized way, I would say.
Okay, brilliant. We've had two kind of comments / questions come in. I think Iwa Lola has just said it's been insightful. She's currently in the journey, and she said it's going to be very helpful for getting everybody aligned on the strategic goals. So I think that's just a thank you. But then we have a question from Ricardo. And you touched on this a little bit, but I'll ask it again. In terms of UXR team size, when would you start the Research Ops practice?
As soon as you can. That's the answer. Many people, the thing with Research Ops is like it comes as, I'm not going to say an afterthought, but it comes a little bit later in the mind of many hiring managers or people who are doing the strategy of a team. And I see the other way around. And the reasoning is this. If you have a team of, let's say, 5 researchers or 6 researchers, and you don't have clear processes in place, and you kind of like just like jamming a little bit, okay, everybody, we know what we are researching, maybe we align with stakeholders, and we have kind of like, we get the roadmap right and so on. But if everybody's doing kind of something ad hoc or their own way, then it will be harder to standardize that. If you start with Research Ops from the beginning, maybe with your first or even second researcher, but again, I say I would hire a Research Ops specialist before I even hire a researcher. So they help you build the practice. Every time you onboard a new researcher, it will be easier for them to understand and to actually hit the ground running. Because Research Ops has also one of the part. I mean, I haven't mentioned this here because this is also related to, particularly to continuous discovery. But one of the things Research Ops is responsible for is onboarding. So creating the proper onboarding experience for newcomers is also part of that. So if you have clear processes in place, you have a clear onboarding, and that it can help you scale the team. So that's why I said it should be right at the beginning. So I wouldn't wait if you had the chance.
Brilliant. Great. Well, that actually brings us to time. So thank you very much, Julian. I hope everybody out there enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.